We are continuing with the teachings of Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj from the book I Am That. So the seeker is asking Maharaj, what is the true self? And what is the motivation behind asking this question? So the masters always see what is the motivation behind a question. And the motivation is that the seeker is not totally at peace. So he has experienced some peace with practices like yoga. But again, there is some confusion, there is some conflict that resides within him. And that keeps his search going on. So Maharaj responds to him, and I will read out his words. The true knowledge of the self is not a knowledge. It is not something that you can find by searching, by looking everywhere. It is not to be found in space or time. Knowledge is but a memory, a pattern of thought, a mental habit. All these are motivated by pleasure and pain. It is because you are goaded by pleasure and pain that you are in search of knowledge. Being oneself is completely beyond all motivation. You cannot be yourself for some reason. You are yourself, and no reason is needed. So Maharaj here is giving a direct pointer. You see, if the mind comes up with a reason to attain the true self, that mind will never be able to see what is the true self, because mind by nature is divisive. Because mind is nothing but thought. So what happens with thought is that when you come across a certain piece of knowledge, there automatically comes another thought which creates doubt about that knowledge. And Maharaj's pointer is direct. He is not pointing you to the knowledge that is acquired in the world. He is not talking about philosophizing. He is not talking about intellectual debates. It is not that through great intellectual process you are just going to, come across this vast knowledge and the true self will be revealed. He is saying it can be known right now, here. Go beyond the pain and the pleasure cycle, because most of us are trapped in that. The very motivation for seeking begins because of pain and pleasure, which is a wrong beginning itself. Because we experience pain in life, we want to do something about that pain. My work, my relationships, my life is not working. What should I do? How do I bring more peace into my life? By setting things in a particular way. So what we are doing? We are running after pleasures and we are avoiding pain. And that is the very problem that keeps us trapped in this duality, which obstructs the true self. And this is basically from the perspective of the separate self, because actually it is all the true self. There is no duality. But the separate self, the one that thinks he or she is separate from the rest, that is the one which lives in pain and suffering, because it is they are running after pleasures and they are trying to avoid pain. But we are not bringing our attention to this vastness in which this whole cycle of pleasure and pain is being played out. So in that context, Maharaj says, your book knowledge is useful to begin with, but soon it must be given up for direct experience, which by its very nature is inexpressible. Sometimes when I'm talking to people, they try to convince me that they have got it. So they use words and they refer to it, and then they give it a name. I have realized Brahman. I have realized the One. I have seen the One. But that is all intellectual contemplation, because there is a need for this I to express and say that I have realized it, I have seen it, I know it. But it alone is pure knowing, in which I is just an appearance. This is the concept. So when the need comes to explain the absolute, not just explain, but to force one's opinion on the absolute, that this is the absolute, I have seen the absolute, I know the absolute, I am the awakened one, that is when it becomes clear that certain pain is being avoided. Pain of being limited is being avoided, because what is limited will feel small, can feel unworthy, can feel shameful. So there comes this need to avoid talking about the limitation. Therefore, one creates an image of the absolute and says, I have seen that. I know that. I am at peace right now. It is not about you being at peace. The peace that I talk about as a concept, not as truth, is simply peace. Self-contained, yet unlimited. It is not something to be attained, to be acquired. It is something to be seen without an intermediary image in between. That's what Maharaj means here when he says, you are yourself and no reason is needed. You don't have to have a reason to know yourself. Any motivation will lead to attachment, to an outcome. So the outcome will be what your mind imagines, a projection of your own mind, which will be completely illusory. Maharaj says, you can only find what you lose. That which was never lost cannot be found. And this is the basic premise here. So the questioner says that I do experience a certain degree of freedom, but I'm not completely convinced. And Maharaj responds, he says, what has been attained may be lost again. Only when you realize the true peace, the peace you have never lost, that peace will remain with you, for it was never away. Instead of searching for what you do not have, find what is it that you have never lost. That which is there before the beginning and after the ending of everything, that to which there is no birth, no death, that immovable state which is not affected by the birth and the death of the body or the mind, that state you must perceive. Why does these questions come up? Why is our peace disrupted? An important thing to understand is that this process where our true nature is obstructed, it happens through layering of concepts. And layering of concepts happen through seeking. It's a process of seeking, where we go for answers, where we seek answers to questions. But we never examine the questions themselves. We never examine where are those questions coming from. What is the center of it all? For example, fear. Majority of our actions are governed by fear. What we pay attention to mostly is the behavior. We are trying to cut down multiple fears, different fears one at a time. And Jiddu Krishnamurti would say that instead of cutting down each and every branch, go for the root of the tree. Go to the root of this fear. Just see it, what this fear is, and the problem itself will be taken care of. Because if you try to cut individual branches, the tree will again grow them back. But if you go to the root and uproot the tree entirely from the root, then there is no possibility of the fear to arise. And the actions after that become more spontaneous. So what does that mean? That means there is experience of peace. The peace which you experienced as a child when you were simply exploring this whole creation. You were given a small toy and you would just explore it for hours. Look at a child exploring small objects. Give child a pen or a small object, a paper object, a toy. The child will explore, put the toy in his mouth, or they would scribble, if given a pen. They're so creative. What is happening over there? There are no concepts. There is no seeking. Child does not seek answers. Child is simply exploring every moment. Child does not have concepts. But then concepts are given to us, which is important because life has to be lived and concepts are essential for living a life. But then what happens? We start over-identifying with the concepts. We believe them to be real. We think that the concepts are the only way to live life. We get so fixated by some of the ideas. It has to be this way, it has to be that way. If I don't get money, I will never be happy. If I don't get if I don't get an understanding life partner, I will never be happy. We are given concepts after concepts. The natural ability of the biological organism to be and explore is destroyed. So when those concepts begin to crumble, what remains? What remains is pure experiencing without an experiencer, which is joy, which is bliss, which is what the masters are talking about. It is direct perception, unfiltered perception of the vastness, of the infiniteness that you are. It is your own being. It is your own amness. Now, the questioner asks, how can such perception come about? To which Maharaj responds, in life, nothing can be had without overcoming obstacles. The obstacles to the clear perception of one's true being are desire for pleasure and fear of pain. It is the pleasure-pain motivation that stands in the way. The very freedom from all motivation, the state in which no desire arises, is the natural state. In your beingness, amness, have you ever experienced any desire? Even if the desire arises, which it can arise, you see there is no identification with it. You just see it as an arising, as something which is manifesting in this vastness, infiniteness, and you are the infiniteness. And there is no separation of anything in that. You are both the space and the thought. But the nature of both is pure knowing. So there is no attachment to the thought. There is no judgment to the thought. There is no resisting the thought. It is simply accepted, whatever comes in the moment, pleasure or pain. And that itself leads to direct experiencing of the true self, which Maharaj says is your very natural state. So finally, the questioner asks, does it take time to give up desires? To which Maharaj says, if you leave it to time, millions of years will be needed. Giving up desire after desire is a lengthy process with the end never in sight. Leave alone your desires and fears. Give your entire attention to the subject, to him who is behind the experience of desire and fear. Ask, who desires? Let the desire bring you back to yourself. So, here's the thing. If you count on time, if you count on self-improvement as a means to achieve wholeness, then that self itself becomes an obstacle to the wholeness. Because the self by nature is a changing entity, and what is changing cannot witness the change, the changeless. It is only the changeless that can see the changing. So, when it is understood that all these desires are basically leading you to the subject, which is the I. I desire this, I want my life to be like this. How all of this movement is creating this whole movement of pain and pleasure in life, how it is disrupting your peace. The pursuit of pleasure and the avoidance of pain, which are both the same movements, how these are disrupting your peace. You are aware at all times. So when you ask this question, when you say, how much time will it take for me to realize the truth? You are actually deceiving yourself in that very moment. It's a wrong question. Because what you're seeking is beyond time. It is timeless. Therefore, in the time, you cannot know that as an object of your experience. Anything that is seen in time is a product of imagination. It is a product of thought. And thought by nature is divisive. So whatever thought produces will never stick, will never stay. However, the space in which the thought is manifesting, once that is seen, I'm using the word space, but I do not mean the literal space. I mean everything. Even to call it everything doesn't do justice to it. It is completeness, wholeness, which is your most natural state. So when you give up this whole movement of pain and pleasure, that is when you see it directly. If you're asking how much time will it take, what is the method, what is the trick, what is the process, how many hours do I have to meditate, which yoga do I have to perform, you are only diverting. You are creating diversions. See it now. It is here and now. This is what it is.